Hello, welcome to the Drawing the Ideal Self podcast for March 2021. Today's episode is going to be an interview with Sally Robbins, and you might know Sally if you've been to anything at the Coventry Constructivist Centre, because she's the person who pulls it all together and holds the waiting list for courses and also keeps the mailing list of people who are to be contacted whenever we have an event. So Sally is a clinical psychologist and trained some time ago, so she's very experienced. But that means that those of us who trained a long time ago aren't doctors, because the training has changed over recent years. Recent to me, maybe not recent to you. So Sally is a clinical psychologist who has been working for many years in services for older adults. So she has something to say about that and using PCP in that kind of environment, but also about dementia. That's really an issue that lots of us are thinking about now, and I think COVID has brought it to our attention even more so. Okay, let's get on with the interview. So, unfortunately, my side of it also sounded a bit weird. So at the beginning, I sound a bit aggressive and shouty at the very intro. And then the sound didn't seem right on my side of it. So you won't hear much from me, but you hear a lot from Sally, so that's absolutely fine. So, Sally, can you tell us a bit about your professional background and what sort of career you've had in terms of your profession rather than the PCP bit?
Okay, yeah. So I qualified in 1980 as a clinical psychologist. I'd done my first degree at what was Bedford College in Regent's Park, rather nice. Lots of ducks, leafy, all that stuff.
I know where that is.
Nice little place, actually. It had been a women's college originally.
Okay.
It doesn't exist anymore. It's supposedly amalgamated with Royal Holloway, which meant that they sold it off, basically, and it's disappeared into the mist of time. But I'd been there and quite liked London. And I mean, I think like most other people, I applied for anything to do clinical training. I always knew that that was what I wanted. I had a conversation when I was either 13 or 14. I had chicken pox, and in those days, the GP came to see you a long time ago. And he said, and what are you going to be when you grow up? And was somewhat taken aback when I said, a psychologist or a psychiatrist? I'm not sure which.
Gosh.
And I can remember him stopping and looking at me. And he said, I think a psychologist. And looking back, it probably meant you're female, you can't be a doctor. But that's not how I took it at the time. Anyway, so I wanted to get into clinical, always wanted to get into clinical from doing the first degree. And the Institute of Psychiatry said yes, much quicker than anybody else. And in those days, they didn't interview.
Oh,
so I just got this letter saying, yes, whoopee. Yes, please, I said.
Okay.
So I'd only done a couple of little voluntary summer placements. Amazing looking back, they took me. But but then it was the Institute of Psychiatry, not wishing to slag them off, but it was totally behavioural in those.
Oh, was it?
Anything else was kind of... There were a few people who snuck off to go and see the psychoanalytic chums over somewhere else in the hospital, but that never attracted me. And Monty Shapiro was down the corridor kind of inventing cognitive psychology at the time. We had rumours about what Monty was doing. He was about to retire. Anyway, so yeah, that's why I trained. And then I was very lucky because I didn't have any money behind me or anything. And it was difficult to get funding in those days, but I got sponsorship from what was then the South East Thames Regional Authority. So I was one of 4 clinical psychologists sponsored in what was then a 2-year training, MPhil, and you got your second year out in somewhere in the region. So first year in Maudsley, Bethlehem complex.
Yeah.
And second year out, and I went to Bexley. I'm not going to be able to pronounce this properly, but a narco-syndicalist
Oh.
Would you believe? Department, which, as far as I could see, meant that everybody took some kind of organisational or managerial type responsibility, and nobody was the boss.
Oh, right, okay.
Until things got normalised forcibly.
Interesting.
But, yeah, it was an interesting start.
So you're at Bexley, and where did you go after Bexley?
Yeah, you couldn't get promoted in those days. It was really difficult. So I had to move for promotion. I went to, it was George's, basically St George's in South London, which the patch went from Battersea down to Morden. So quite a range, quite a big patch in population terms. And by the time I qualified, the first job I took at Bexley was half older people and half adult.
Right.
And then that second job over at George's was all older people, and it was 75 over because of the population numbers.
Okay.
And then did that for a few years and got, sort of people contacted me, and they were setting up a new department in Maidstone. They hadn't got any specialist services for older people. And
right.
I went over there with another promotion.
Okay.
Stayed there 10 years. We started the service, nice multidisciplinary service, and then moved up to the Coventry department. I'm trying to think how long I was there. Long time. 15 years, something like that. Can't remember. Yeah, and retired effectively from there, but of course everything amalgamated. So in the end, I was head of secondary psychological care, which meant adult and older people, going from North Warwickshire, South Warwickshire, Coventry, and it included Rugby.
Okay.
So sort of bigger patch. And I'd forgotten. Actually, I did. Isn't it weird thinking about it?
Yeah.
I did have a period in Maidstone where I was the managerial head of mental health for older people.
Oh, okay.
For 3 years, 2.5 years, something like that.
And you got into working with older people then relatively early in your career, and you stayed there.
Yes, I did rather unusually a placement in my clinical training with older people at the Maudsley and Bethlehem. That bit, yeah.
Right.
So, bit unusual to have the opportunity in those days, and also to take it. Nobody wanted it. Silly fool.
Well, maybe that's why they said everyone has to do a placement with
later. That came
to make sure they got people spread across the different areas.
Yeah.
And at what point during that did you come across PCP then?
Well, I kind of bumped into. I can remember actually my interview at Bedford had a self-characterisation in it.
Really?
Yeah. So wow. I think somebody was probably just getting data for their PhD, something. Looking back, who knows?
That'd be great to read it now, wouldn't it?
Yes. Well, maybe not. It could be embarrassing. So it was kind of around, and I can remember at that point there were Saturday workshops. You could, I think it was a tenner or something, which probably wasn't that much. Run by Dougal Mackay and Reinhard Kowalski, somewhere in central London. And so I, used to toddle off on Saturdays to this. And Don Bannister spoke.
Okay.
And the only thing I can remember that he said, and I gather he was famous for it, was he would have a title and he'd turn up and say, "Oh, my title is so-and-so, but I'm not going to talk about that." I can remember feeling quite peeved. He's not going to come for this. Oh dear. Anyway, and then of course at Bexley it was riddled with PCP, I guess.
Right.
And my supervisor was a PCPer, and
Okay.
Most people there had a fair acquaintance, if not an allegiance to.
Yeah. And then you went off to the course at some point.
Yes.
That was.
Yeah. When did I did the original, the I think it's called the Basic General or something weird in those days. Yes, I went to the PCP Centre, as it was, run by Faye in Victoria and did my foundation course.
So that was Faith Franceller. Did she
Yes.
teach you on that course?
A bit, yes. They had a system though then where people doing the advanced course, each part of doing the advanced course was to teach the foundation course.
Yeah.
So most of it came from one of the other trainees, as it were.
Yeah.
Okay. Good time though.
So then you eventually did the advanced course in PCP.
Yes, ages.
Psychotherapy training.
Yes, at Tamworth.
Yeah.
It was running from Tamworth,
Okay. Yeah. So the PCP sounds like it started early and has continued all the way through. So, now, or in the last, in your last role in the NHS as well, how would you say you used PCP?
I used it clinically, pretty much, just thought in that way and amalgamated it, and nobody particularly looked over my shoulder and told me I shouldn't be. Partly, I don't think there was quite the control that there has been for some poor benighted colleagues in recent times, and partly I was kind of in a position where my sessions were my own. And actually there was quite a fair, there was a point actually in Coventry where we got the nod for running the advanced course on NHS premises and with a deal about, how much free training we would give. And we used to run the foundation course there, again, with the same sort of agreed with management deal about who we were training and at what cost and all the rest of it. So that, there was an acceptance that this was good stuff and they got good value out of it.
Yes. So in your clinical work, you've always worked predominantly with older people.
Yeah.
And often that has meant going to people's houses, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Or seeing them in a residential setting or wherever they were. And how has PCP fitted in with that kind of work?
Well, I think it's something about a very clear focus on what is their reality, what is their difficulty or difficulties, and what within their realm of possibility might they do about it. It tells you exactly where you're starting and what the job is, and there's no silly nonsense about protocols or what you should be doing. I should probably confess, since we're talking about PCP, I have never done a repertory grid in a clinical intervention. Not that I disapprove of them or whatever. It's just kind of never been me, and it's never really fitted. So I feel a bit like I'm not a proper PCP.
So what would be your go-to tools, would you say, or techniques?
I've used the self-characterization a lot, and I think it's not written stuff at all. It's not right for everybody, but it can really jump you into a position where you've got a kind of joint starting-ish point with somebody that they feel they've expressed themselves, and you feel you've listened to enough and got enough idea of how they construe the world, that you're starting from one position. Because one of the difficulties, I think, with older people, one of the things that trips us up is that sense of not being on the same page, even if you might be, but that kind of sense of them thinking, does this whippersnapper have any sense of what they're on about, what a load of nonsense, and whatever off-putting things you're wearing or doing or something that makes them feel out of step with you. And the number of people I've heard, at work or in training courses going on about how older people go on too much and will tell you all their history and be boring and things like that. And then you've got the kind of contrast pole of, oh, yes, reminiscence is a good idea and it's a tool and it's, because my career, of course, has spanned all those kind of fads in older people, going from reality orientation, then it was reminiscence, then it was validation, and whatever. And they're all the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah.
Actually, that's the wrong phrase, because it's not that there's nothing in them, but that sense that anything is the be all and end all is just, it's just silly, isn't it, really? But yeah, you get these bandwagons. So
the self-characterization, obviously, you're doing that with people who are older. I don't know, is there more content, or do you find that it's sort of reified and people are very firm in the way they're construing themselves?
Well, of course, I don't wonderfully have a contrast pole, because most of, as opposed to younger people, I think is the unspoken question there. And although, I've seen some carers, and in my private work, small private practice since I retired from the NHS, I've seen a few younger people. So in a way, I don't know. What I would say is it's often phrased as a story.
Right.
It's quite often, it's a kind of story of my life-ish thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how normal that is, if I'd been working with 40-year-olds or 20-year-olds or whatever it is. I remember Ray Evans, who was part of the training. In fact, he held the central role in the academic PCP training at Tamworth and at London at the same time, wasn't it? Because you were there.
Yeah.
And he always reckoned that the construing systems of older people were more complex. And the image that came to me when he used to talk about that was almost like something like an apple tree. If you've got an apple tree in an orchard and it's been pruned and pruned and pruned, it's got loads of spurs and little offshoots and things, and a lot of complexity to it, but it's still fruitful. I feel I need to say that, since people put older people down so much. And the younger people just had less bulk almost of construing. He used to say, I don't know if that's true, but it was always an interesting image to me.
Yeah. And you can imagine, that kind of, as you grow, your branches get stronger. Some of your construing becomes very, we've decided it's okay that, whatever it is that you've construing,
maybe
the way you feel about your family, those kind of things. But then, older people will sometimes have terrible traumas almost towards the end of their life, where they've gone along okay, and suddenly something happens to them, and then they're facing a completely different world.
Yes, and I mean, the tree image would do for that as well, isn't it? If you think of perhaps a tree that's been struck by lightning, or been in, one of these gales that we increasingly get, and suddenly it's a gale from the east instead of the west or something, and a big bough falls off. That's your daughter dying, or your husband dying, or you were very wedded to your career and now you haven't got it anymore, or that sort of, or your own health.
Yeah.
So that's probably enough stretching that metaphor. But I think, you can go that far.
Yeah. And what about work with people with dementia? Because I can remember you talking about dementia long before there was much talk of dementia. Now everybody's talking about it. And one of the things I really learned from you only was a sort of pre-dementia discomfort thing that happens.
Oh, right.
So people feeling, out of sorts, maybe down, maybe anxious when they'd been all right. And
did I use the phrase on the slide?
Yeah, and you
that's my phrase.
That as, I wonder what's going to show in a couple of years.
Yes, because I mean, sometimes something like a dementia will come on stupendously quickly, but often there's what I call a bit of a slide, so people can't quite be as secure in their construing. They get surprised more. They can't quite move around their construing system as well, so they get stuck on things, and it's a sad and frightening and worrying and undermining kind of thing to happen. I think it also partly relates to of course, your own style of construing. So if you are a person who is very precise and is used to being in charge and on top of everything, it can hit you very hard. If you're, in PCP terms, looser, more fluid, more happy to change, you might not be quite so frightened and despondent about it. But yeah, we would certainly get a fair number of the people who came in with a this person is anxious label, or this person is depressed label, and you get talking to them, and it's more that sort of thing, and obviously with the clinical psychology background and I did a fair amount of neuropsychology and that side as well, because you've got to try and span it. That's part of the love of working with older people. You've got the physical health and the neuro stuff and the wonderful different personalities and construing systems all flattened on top of one another. But they would come in with that label, and you'd perhaps spot some cognitive difficulties, just have a sense of them in the background. Yes. Yeah. So my phrase on the slide is for those people. And, if you've got a long enough career, and I did have, you would see some of them coming back. Or you'd have to fight to get them a different label because people had already pigeonholed them as depressed or something. And you'd have to kind of try and do some testing and try and kind of make people notice. And by make people with that slightly aggressive tone there, I'm afraid, I meant my colleagues, because, and some of the structuring of services, perhaps even more so now, you get in one track or another, and God help you, because people aren't tracks.
Yes, and it would be pretty difficult if, let's say, you had always had intermittent difficulties with anxiety. Then it may go unnoticed, or
easily.
Here you are again.
Easily. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And especially if you're quite bright. I remember, it's one of the ones I quote a lot, Jane Muirs, who I now work with in rugby dementia support. She started it off, and I'm a trustee and volunteer there. But one of her pieces of research was to do with the formal diagnosis of dementia, and noticing that if you've been bright and able, particularly able through your life, where the diagnosis is supposed to be to do with decline in several areas, when it's actually operationalized, especially when it's done by people who aren't able to do neuropsych and things like that, it tends not to be about decline. It means decline to a certain level.
Yeah.
So it takes much longer if you're a very bright person to get a dementia diagnosis, because you haven't dropped far enough. People see you and professionals see you and go, oh, you're still able to do this, that, and the other. Yes, but I used to be a nuclear physicist, or you won't get your diagnosis in a hurry, mate.
No.
So and Jane proved that fairly conclusively with her data.
And you do some work with carers now.
Yes.
So tell us a bit about that. And from a PCP point of view, what sort of struggles do you see that people have?
Oh, golly. Right. Well, a lot of my carer work now is within the rugby dementia support charity, to be fair. I have done some, but not, well, I don't do a big volume of private work. I think there's a lot there about role change. And in fact, Diane Allen and I are going to do one of our quarterly study days, except it'll probably be on Zoom, so it'll be a study session.
Yeah.
Because nobody can watch a Zoom for all day, or if they do, they'd get a headache, I think. Yeah. We're going to do the one in June on caring and transitional role, because that role from maybe some equality or well, whatever the pre-existing relationship was, and then that move into being much less equitable or much more fixed in certain caring roles. And then, I mean, certainly with dementia, and I guess, yeah, with quite a lot of conditions that you end up being a carer, you're then ever so gradually, sometimes quickly, playing catch up all the time, aren't you? You kind of adjust to whatever it is that you need to provide, and what this now means for the relationship, and what's acceptable and what's manageable and all the rest of it. And then things get worse or different.
Yeah.
And so you're endlessly having to adapt. So that flexibility and creativity that it calls for from people is, it's a real big ask. And what you're left with at the end, because for most of the people I see, eventually somebody dies. And then you've turned into this person and lost large parts of yourself that haven't been used or haven't been exercised. You lose confidence in lots of bits of you that used to be active.
Right.
There's a little bit of a parallel, I think. I think certainly some of our carers and some of our bereaved carers as well, the ones who are now living on their own, I see it with them. There's going to be a real issue coming out of this COVID stuff. And I'm not saying it's only with carers, but people just aren't used to going out.
Yeah.
They aren't used to being with people. They're not used to doing things. And it's actually anxiety provoking. They're not quite sure how to construe it. They're really not sure that they're up to it. And I mean, we're talking with some of them about it, and some of them acknowledge and recognise and are trying to do a little bit more of whatever they're allowed to do, because they know darn well it's very easy just to kind of retreat into whatever role you've been left.
Yeah,
so I think that's true of carers, but also, as I say, to some extent with the whole lockdown, what it's done to people in their relationships. Things have withered.
Yes.
And
I suppose
rejuvenating.
Some people will have received a diagnosis during the lockdown started that journey in relative isolation.
Yes, I'm afraid you caught me at a sore point on that, actually. We were talking in particular in the carer group last week. We're currently running on Zoom a carer group every week, a singing group every week for carers and people with dementia and various other things. But it kind of came to a head this last week, the lack of support, the lack of follow-up. And we've heard of several people who are they're assessed on the phone, they're given a diagnosis, I'm sorry, got dementia, maybe they're given some specific, you've got Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I know it's a long time ago, but when I was at George's, we used to have a thing where we went and looked at the brains of people we'd known who then died and luckily had donated their brains, honestly. And we did. I think there was a very, very, very small percentage who structurally, when you actually looked at their brain, the damage tied up with one dementia category. There was nearly always something else going on. So this kind of glib, you've got Alzheimer's.
Right.
I know that's a lot broader now, thank goodness, and we've got much more idea of different pathways and subtypes and what have you. But all the same, I'm kind of mistrustful of it. I think things are a lot more complex.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not careful, I'll go completely off on one there, sorry.
Okay, let me,
I can't remember.
Let me take you back.
Off on one.
Let me take you back to a bit more on PCP then.
Yep.
So if you think about, you've been to lots of things over the years, lots of training sessions,
I'm really lucky.
Lots of conferences and all sorts of things. Have there been some particular standout things that?
Oh my goodness me.
There may not have been.
Golly, poser. I mean, it's just loads of listening to people and picking up new ideas. I mean, you're one of them. One of the other things I use a lot is the ideal self, as I think you well know.
Good.
And it wasn't a PCP thing, but picking up the button sculpt from, oh golly, I've gone blank. Bother. I hate it when people don't acknowledge where techniques come from. I get very hot under the collar when people nick bits of PCP and
they turn out as something else.
Yeah, pretend they've made it up themselves. We need to just say Andy Treacher, of course. Sorry,
right.
But seeing it all in PCP terms, I think it expands you a lot as well. Quite a lot of the non-verbal stuff, different drawing techniques and writing things, and Mary Frances and some of her little exercises and things. It just stretches your mind, and you might use them directly with somebody.
Yeah.
And maybe if we do go ahead and make Elaine Schoen's idea of this this kind of
pocketbook
of Ready Reckner techniques, it'll be more accessible for people, and they'll think, hang on, I remember something like that, and get it out more quickly. But it's more an accumulation like that, and of meeting special people, who spoke to me, I suppose.
Yeah,
I'll probably think of something when we stop talking. But
you've thought of lots of things, actually, what you said. And if you imagine, some of the people who listen to the podcast are relatively new to PCP, what sort of suggestions would you give to them so that they can develop their skills and interests and experience? Anything in particular that you think helped you along the way? Or I think I would say this because I teach it, of course, now. I feel having someone take you through the theory, without, you don't have to read the original 1955 2 volumes, but just getting the sense of the shape of it all gives you such an ability to understand and to reflect on what you're doing and on yourself, of course. I mean, that's ultimately we're all looking at ourselves as well, aren't we? Absolutely. So, and that's why, as a little complex centered in Coventry, we run the foundation course to give people a sense of the theory, and of how that then manifests in what you might do in real life with real people and real issues. Not kind of page 4 says so and so. Like lots of theoretical things. Can't stand that sort of nonsense. But I also think just picking up. When I was doing my clinical psychology training, if people didn't want to be pigeonholed or were slightly uncomfortable with what was then behavioural, they and I, let's be honest, used to try and call themselves eclectic. Yeah.
Lord help us, pompous ass I was. It was almost an aspirational thing, the idea that I would pick up different things. But the trouble is, if you pick things up, it's if you're not careful, you're a bit like a litter picker, with those tongs. You've got your bin bag, then you shove things in. You might find some useful bits, but how do they relate to one another? How do you do anything coherent?
Yeah.
So the coherence comes from the course, and that's why we've been bothering to run a foundation course for, oh golly, it's well over 20 years now, isn't it?
Must be.
We've run it every year, and sometimes more than once a year.
Yeah.
So, at the risk of sounding like I'm doing some kind of advert, I think something like that is a useful thing to do. If you've met a few PCP techniques or PCP practitioners and you've thought, that sounds interesting, and you want to go further with it, then get an acquaintance with the theory, because then you've got a structure to hang your bits and pieces on, and to understand how they relate to one another, and to adapt them to what you need and what the person you're working with or people you're working with need. Because, as I think I've said a couple of times already, that kind of rigid, now we do step 2. No. Don't bother doing step 2 if that's what you're going to do, because people are not step 1 or step 2.
No.
Nor are we.
Yeah.
You bore yourself silly.
And I think one of the things that happens during the foundation course is people come and realise that the theory is quite big.
Yeah.
And they tend to have a sort of dip in the middle, don't they, where they think, oh, my God, this is too much to know.
Yes.
And I'm not supposed to remember all these terms.
No, you're not.
And then it ends with, we show them some real cases doing real work.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, okay, it's making sense now. And then they go on to learn other things after.
Yeah, I think we make help some of them stay afloat, even in the kind of, goodness me, that's a big theory. Because it is absolutely a meta theory, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, my image for that, I'm terrible on images, as you know, but anyway, let's say it. If you go to a zoo, maybe you might not want to these days, but if you go to a zoo and you watch something like a lemur, one of those monkey type things that swings around the branches.
Yeah.
And I've always thought of the theory as the kind of, there's the branches, or in zoos, of course, you get, bits of scaffolding and what have you.
Yeah.
And if one day I'll be like a lemur. No, I never will manage it. But that sense that you can move around, and sometimes you can move from one bit to another because, you're thinking about sociality, and then you're noticing the fragmentation, and then because you're understanding it in that way, you come up with a different way of talking about it, or a different question to ask, or a different elaboration, I guess, to share with the person, or to offer, or to ask them about, and they come out with it. And that's the most important bit, of course. So I am a monkey that attempts to swing around this theoretical structure, and I guess, as you say, right through it, we're making reference to little bits of real work to try and kind of help people hang on to, yes, this is real, but it's also a big overarching theory. And then there's only so much you can do, but that's where the quarterly sessions come in, isn't it, to build on that. And the new books, I mean, you've written a book recently, a kind of starter post foundation book. Peter and Diane have, and you keep nagging me to write mine.
Indeed.
And it's about trying to fan that out. I mean, that's why we wrote the foundation guide as well. It was originally, it was the kind of the handouts we used in a foundation course, but it's to try and pull that together and help people to get it into a digestible form.
Yes.
And it's been interesting, hasn't it, this year, having to do Zoomy things, because we actually did the foundation course on Zoom. And in fact, because I grandly call myself course organizer, and get inquiries about, I've had several people say, I had one today actually, I live in so-and-so, so I don't really want to come to the course in person. Yeah. And I feel it's a great loss. I mean, it was wonderful the way people took to the Zoom Foundation. Yeah. But I think that it's the contrast pole, isn't it? I know that I wasn't able to deliver some aspects of it. Yeah. And I feel the loss. But, people are wanting that. And, clearly we're thinking about what more can we do, as well as the kind of YouTube videos and different things. And you doing this. I mean, it's another way of things being accessible for people who may or may not be able to come and see us in person or do something more substantial, isn't it?
Yes. And I kind of think of it as people can either come and do the whole thing, or they might spend some time getting a taste of all the little things.
Yes, they may go around with their picker-uppers and I shouldn't be so naughty. It was just the way that it was rather pretentious of me to try and pretend I was eclectic. But it was, as opposed to, I'm only doing behavioural stuff in a behavioural framework. And I'm not interested in all that other shilly-shallying.
Yes,
so I'm trying to put myself at the other end of the pole.
I think most people, though, who I have met in the PCP world have got into it because either they've had a supervisor or they've read about real people doing real PCP, or they've seen it happen in a session. Yeah. And they've said, oh, my word, I have to learn about that. I have to know what it is that's going on. And I think that's the beauty of it. That was the thing that struck me with Tom Ravenette's work. Describe his casework, and I was just gobsmacked.
Yeah. I mean, I still am. You read his stuff and you're just in awe, aren't you? Yeah. There's a lot of wonderful people around.
Yeah.
Well, he's not around anymore, I know, but the memory lingers on, and his write-ups of it linger on. Thank goodness.
So tell people then what is available in Coventry then through our little group.
Okay. So at the moment we have an annual foundation course, the original structure of which was 5 days. We've got our structure like that. This year we had to move it onto Zoom, so we did 10 sessions because it's too much to do. And we're not quite sure, to be honest, what we're going to do this year, are we? Because we're not sure what we'll be allowed to do or able to do. And we do have aspirations to create some kind of a sort of foundation course that's available further afield anyway. So we might, I don't know how quickly we might create an in-person and some sort of different thing. I think, if I'm honest, I'll always think the in-person is better because I like to be with people.
Yeah.
You can just flex more with them. But some kind of foundation course of that sort will definitely be available this year, unless we all go under a bus or under a COVID. We have the structure of the 4 quarterly days, which have now shrunk to Zoom sessions for the moment. And we've got we had the Constructivist coaching course, golly, finished just over a year ago, actually, now, the layest one. So that has created the idea is 2 special interest group meetings a year for people interested in coaching and PCP related to that and such like. Early days for that one, but I need to get tightened up on one probably for May, something like that.
Yeah.
What else do we do? Well, some of us are still doing some clinical work. There's quite a bit of writing been going on, as I've said. You doing this, and some supervision still. There's some availability for supervision, not tons, and that does tend to be online, doesn't it?
Yeah. Probably easier online for
I think so. I think, yeah, I think it's something that well, even before all this COVID carry on, most of that was happening online.
Yeah.
Just to be practical. Yeah.
And one of the things to do with the study days is that those days have happened according to suggestions of the people who might attend them, haven't they?
Oh, yeah.
It isn't you make up the whole program. It's that people say we've never done one on this.
Sally says you should now. I don't think so. I'm not that creative anyway.
It's kind of co-constructed.
Yeah, 20 odd. I don't think actually the foundation course is well over 20 years. I think the quarterlies have been since something like 03.
Yeah,
304, like something like that. But anyway, 4 a year, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not. It comes out of our interest. I mean, the original thing was to feed us, wasn't it? After we did the advanced course.
Yeah.
You know, and for me to structure myself and make myself read things that might take me out of the straightforward.
And they've been quite varied in delivery style, haven't they? Sometimes they've been, here's a selection of papers, read them, come ready to discuss.
Yes.
And then somebody would facilitate that.
Yeah, and always a workshop aspect.
Yeah. Or sometimes it's somebody presenting and then presenting, you know, whatever it is that they're going to talk about. And then there's a workshop aspect as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I think probably someone listening to this might think here's a few papers bit sounds deathly dull, but one of the difficulties, and I know it's easier in some ways now, and there are things like the online journal with Yearn and you know, there's the George Kelly Society, you know, international things and papers can be easier to get hold of, but there's a heck of a lot of books and papers which people still struggle to either get hold of or to know that they could look for them. So I think sometimes those sessions where we say, oh, and of course there's a paper here and a paper there and we'll send them out, is actually, you know, it's a bit like opening a shop. And you know, I went in a shop today, daring, eh? And it's a relatively new delicatessen. I just went in, had a little shufty round, and noticed they'd got some particular cheeses. But if I hadn't gone in the shop, I wouldn't have known the cheese was there.
Yeah,
and you're just not going to find things. You're not going to know the links.
Yes.
Unless we all share together and say, oh, there's this paper and that. And of course, that reminds me of so-and-so technique, that you can adapt it in this way. And I used it with so-and-so and changed it this way because the person was, I don't know, illiterate or deaf or I don't know, whatever. And it's about those links and sharing those ideas that's where the fruitfulness comes from, isn't it?
And of course, the other fruitfulness is the cake. But the study days.
Cake on Zoom, sadly.
No, but Sally makes cupcakes, and everybody feels very happy to be there in the room so they can eat them in the breaks.
I'm managing to keep that going because today, I mean, you were always fond of the marmalade cake, weren't you? So I've been doing tray bakes for the COVID vaccination volunteers. So, it was cake today, but sadly not for a PCP session.
No.
One of these days we'll be back to cake. Yeah.
So what if people are interested in any of these things? They just need to send you an email. Which I'll tell them the address, but also it's on the website. So
yes, and some of it at the moment is a bit tentative on the website. As I say, this inquiry I had today about the foundation course, I don't think the person's looked at the website from the way it was phrased. But But it will be relatively up to date. I mean, we do luckily have a chap who, I send him stuff and he sorts it out.
Yeah.
Jolly quickly. So there will be ideas and links and different things there. And you can look at what we used to do, some of the old sessions and ask about that, or gives you a fair idea.
Yeah. So if I'll put the information in the show notes.
Yeah, okay.
People will get, and I'll put them on my website so they can see, make sure they've got the correct address for the website and your address to email you and say, what's happening? Can you get me on the mailing list?
Yes. All properly GDPR'd, of course.
Yeah.
But yes. Yeah. Yes,
okay.
Nice.
Thank you very much indeed, Sally. That's great. And what's really nice is that some of the people who've done the foundation course do listen to this. And they won't have been able to ask you all these questions. So they'll be intrigued to hear what you have to say.
Really? Some of them might fast forward through some of it. Who knows?
Anyway, thank you so much. Great. Thanks.
So the website that Sally referred to is www.covpcp.com. I actually don't think you need the www anymore, but there we are. That's what it is. So you can go on there and find information about both the study days and also the foundation course, and let her know of your interest. One of the things that she does do is keep a waiting list of people who want to be notified when the next foundation course is available or anything else that's coming up. We had the second ever PCP coaching course at the Coventry Constructivist Centre. If you have a particular interest in developing skills in those areas, you need to email Sally and let her know that, because she is keeping a note of things that are particularly requested. And then within our group, we see what we might be able to do about it. The book that she mentioned is The Beginner's Guide to Personal Construct Therapy. And there's a version about working with adults and couples written by Diane Allen and Peter Cummins. And then there's my version, which is about working with young people. I'll put a link to both of those in the show notes. I've got a couple of other interviews lined up with people. And I would be most grateful if you would be willing to be interviewed about your work with PCP. And if you think, well, I haven't got very much that I've been doing, but I've got a little bit, I could interview you and maybe put together a number of people who've done a little bit that they're willing to talk about and knit them together as one episode. So please get in touch with me at drawingtheidealself@icloud.com. And thanks so much to the people who have contacted me. Doing this podcast is very strange because there's no immediate feedback. It's not like talking to a live audience. However, it encourages me that there are some people listening and that they're finding it useful. So if you hear an episode and you think, oh, it really resonated with something that I've been thinking about, or that's made me think more, or whatever, and you'd like to tell me, I would really appreciate it so that I can keep going. Okay, so next time I will be back will be in April, and I look forward to talking to you then. Thanks very much. Bye.